Hello, dear listeners. I'm Davis, and it warms my heart to have you here tonight. Tell me, where are you listening from? Your quiet hearts keep this little corner of stories alive. Thank you for returning each day for our cozy mysteries. Settle in now, with your cup of tea and your calm evening thoughts, because tonight, a small detail becomes something unforgettable. Let me show you where it began. A quiet morning. Soft. Still. Miss Marple sat at her small table. Her teacup rested near her hand. Steam rose in a thin line. Nothing hurried, nothing unsettled. She adjusted her spectacles. A slow, familiar motion. Her eyes followed the rim of the cup, then the saucer, then the folded letter beside it. The letter was the only unusual thing in the room. It waited quietly, edges neat, paper untouched, placed with care by the early post boy. Miss Marple lifted her cup, a small sip, warm, comforting. Yet the letter kept urging for attention. She set the cup down. Her fingers tapped once, a tiny sound against porcelain, barely anything, but enough to disturb the silence. She wondered why this letter had come so early. Post usually arrived later, closer to mid-morning. Never this soon. She knew the village routine well. Her gaze lowered again. Letter, cream paper, neat fold, a stamp pressed firmly in the corner. No return address. Just her name. A clear hand, a steady hand, but not a familiar hand. Miss Marple reached out, stopped just before touching it. Her mind measured the small details. Who wrote it? Why now? She pushed her spectacles up the bridge of her nose. Another habit. Another pause. She wanted no rush. She liked clarity before curiosity. Outside, the morning stayed calm. Inside, nothing moved except her fingertips. She tapped the envelope again. A soft tap. A thinking tap. The seal had not been broken. It waited for her choice. A small decision. Yet small decisions often mattered. More than people realized. Miss Marple breathed out slowly. Her eyes studied the ink. Clean strokes. Even pressure. Someone practiced. The handwriting gave away a type of person. Careful. Educated. But not local. Not from the village. She lifted the envelope at last. Weighed it lightly. Not heavy, but not empty. Something inside rested flat. A single page, perhaps. Or two. Nothing bulky. Nothing bold. Just a quiet message wrapped in paper. Miss Marple brushed the edge. She felt no urgency. Only interest. She always trusted these small shifts. They often led somewhere. Her cup sat untouched now. The tea cooled a little. Her morning rhythm changed, just slightly, but enough to signal the beginning of something. She turned the letter over, looked again at the name. Her name. Written with intention, sent with purpose. Her fingers slipped under the flap, gently, slowly. She did not tear anything. She preferred openings that stayed neat. The paper lifted. The first line of ink waited. Miss Marple leaned closer. Her eyes narrowed just a touch. Her breath paused. Something about it felt unexpected, not alarming, not troubling, just unexpected. And the handwriting did not belong to anyone she expected. Miss Marple opened the letter slowly. The paper unfolded with a small whisper. A single page, slipped free. Neat handwriting covered it in calm lines. It began politely. Warm tone. Careful wording. The kind used by someone who valued courtesy. The request was simple. A gathering at a nearby hall. Turnham Hall. A craft circle for the evening. Nothing grand. Nothing demanding. The note explained the purpose. A small meeting. Some needlework. Some company. A pleasant pastime for the ladies. Miss Marple read the lines twice. They felt gentle, but something in them pressed softly. Not tension, not trouble, just a small urgency, like someone hoping she would not refuse. The invitation mentioned a start time. Earlier than usual for village gatherings. Miss Marple raised an eyebrow. Unusual, but not improper, just slightly curious. She set the page down. Her fingers rested on its edge. She thought of the hall, the quiet rooms, the few people who still worked there, the recent talk of changes, the whispering of reduced means. A craft circle could be helpful, a kind gesture, a way to lift spirits, a way to raise funds. Yes, it all made sense. Still, the timing pulled gently at her thoughts. She read the signature. Lady Alicia Turnham. A gracious woman. A proud woman. A woman who rarely asked for help. That made the note more interesting. Miss Marple lifted the letter again. Her eyes traced each line. No hidden meaning, no sharp edges, only a polite request for her presence. Yet the undertone remained, soft, persistent. She wondered who else had been invited. The village had many skilled hands, many ladies who would enjoy such an evening. Why send this to her in particular? Why the early post? Why the quiet push behind the words? She sipped her tea. The cup felt warm against her fingers. She stared at the folded page. Her thoughts moved in small steps, measured, steady. There was no real reason to refuse, and no real harm in attending. Miss Marple liked observing people. Gatherings often revealed small truths, often more than anyone intended. She tapped the letter once, a tiny habit of decision. Then a soft nod followed. Yes, she would go. She should go, even if something about it felt slightly off. Turnham Hall stood calm as Miss Marple arrived. No fuss, no noise, just the quiet look of a place holding itself together with care. Her steps moved across the entrance rug. A faded patch met her eye. The color thinned in one corner, pressed flat by years, a small sign of long life and careful saving. She looked toward the brass rail on the staircase. It shone warmly, polished with steady hands. Not new polish, but recent enough to show effort. Someone still took pride in this house. Miss Marple walked farther in. The hallway opened softly around her. Quiet rooms lined the corridor, some doors wide, some half open, some very still. Unused rooms always spoke to her. They carried a hush. They carried a story. One room held the shape of a sitting space. Chairs arranged neatly. No imprint on the cushions. No folded blanket. Shelves dust-free. Everything tidy. Everything waiting. She continued on. A tea tray rested on a small table. Cups set in a careful row. Saucers placed evenly. A pot wrapped in a knitted cozy. Steam faint but present. Someone had prepared it with quiet thought. Someone wanted guests to feel welcome. A pair of hands appeared from the side doorway. Soft hands. Hands used to service. They adjusted the cups, shifted one spoon slightly, straightened the cloth. Small movements, but precise. Miss Marple nodded kindly to the maid. Lily, she remembered. A polite girl. Bit too quiet, perhaps, but efficient, thoughtful, her eyes sharp beneath her lowered lashes. As Miss Marple moved through the hall, she noted the small details. A picture removed from a wall, its outline still clear against the wallpaper. A table leg mended neatly with glue. A curtain hem stitched by hand. All signs of careful management. All signs of someone stretching what they had, holding dignity with quiet skill. She admired that. She respected it. But she also understood it. People did their best in changing times. And Turnham Hall seemed to be doing exactly that. Behind every warm gesture lived a small strain. Behind every smile lived a hint of pressure. Miss Marple took another step. Her eyes lifted to a corridor branching left. More rooms. More stories tucked behind old wood. But one doorway stood out. Not open, not wide, just slightly too closed. The latch pressed firm. The frame shadowed. The space around it too neat. Miss Marple paused. The smallest pause. Just long enough to listen to her instincts. She sensed intention there. Something held back. Something kept away from the natural flow of the house. She turned her head, as if in casual curiosity. Her gaze lingered on the door, quiet, measured, thoughtful, and one doorway seemed a bit too carefully closed. The hostess greeted Miss Marple first. Lady Alicia Turnham stood with composed poise. Her smile was graceful. Her hands rested lightly together. Everything about her seemed arranged with quiet dignity, yet her eyes held a hint of calculation. A practiced warmth, a softness that guarded something underneath. Beside her stood the niece, Clara, graceful movements, a gentle face, shoulders just a touch too high, a little too tense for such a simple gathering. Her fingers plucked at a loose thread on her cuff, a tiny motion, repeated twice, then stopped when she noticed Miss Marple looking. The instructor entered next. Madame Reeve. Quiet hands, steady hands, hands shaped by years of needlework, but her eyes moved differently, alert, watching the room, watching the people, watching with purpose. She greeted Miss Marple softly, but her gaze measured everything. Behind her came Mr. Harlan, the merchant, smooth voice, a tone polished like his shop counters. His charm sat easily on him, almost rehearsed. He bowed his head politely, spoke of pleasant weather, spoke of small matters, but his eyes shifted often, checking reactions, checking positions, always checking. Then the local vet entered, Dr. Shaw, a calm man with a steady gaze, but the steadiness held weight. A subtle worry tucked in the corners. He smiled when spoken to, yet his hands tightened around his gloves. A small grip, then release, then grip again. His mind seemed to wander while his body stayed still. Lily, the maid, moved quietly behind them all. Silent steps, measured motions. Her hands carried the tea tray with perfect balance. Her eyes lowered, but her attention sharp. Sharp enough to catch what others missed. She poured tea with smooth precision, not a drop out of place. Yet every now and then, she paused half a second too long, listening, considering. Miss Marple stood among them and took it all in. Not quickly, not forcefully, just gently. Soft glances, small observations, little pieces that settled into her thoughts. The hostess adjusting a cuff, the niece biting her lip, the instructor folding her hands too tightly, the merchant smoothing his jacket twice, the vet clearing his throat without sound, Lily hovering at the edges, watching more than serving. Tiny gestures carried meaning. A glance too quick between two people, a smile a shade too thin, a shift of weight that hinted at unease. Nothing bold, nothing loud, but all of it spoke to her in the quiet way she understood best. Miss Marple nodded gently as greetings finished. Everyone played their part. Everyone wore a small mask. Everyone revealed something they hoped remained unseen, and as she looked across the group once more, one of them avoided her eyes, and she noticed. The group gathered near the small table. A square of deep velvet rested on its surface. At the center lay the rare item, quiet, still, presented with gentle pride. Lady Alicia lifted the cloth edge slightly. The item caught the light. A soft gleam, a careful glow. Nothing showy, nothing bold, just the kind of beauty old families guarded with quiet hands. The guests leaned closer. Clara inhaled softly. The merchant tilted his head. The instructor clasped her fingers. Dr. Shaw adjusted his glasses. Even Lily paused at the doorway. "It has been in our family for decades," Lady Alicia said. Her voice steady, warm, trained for hosting. She traced the edge of the velvet, not the item itself, just the cloth, a careful decision. "It was my grandmother's," she continued. "She kept it locked away most of her life." A small smile, a practiced smile, but the words sat with a heavier tone. "What is it made of?" the merchant asked, his voice smooth, a little too eager. He reached forward, then stopped himself. He knew better than to touch, but the want was there. Lady Alicia explained its history. An heirloom from a quiet branch of the family, passed down from women who preferred privacy, passed down from hands that understood value beyond money. The group nodded. Polite murmurs. Admiring comments. The kind expected in such a moment. Then a soft question rose from the back. "Is it safe here?" The voice was Clara's, barely above a whisper. Her worry slipped through. Unhidden, unprepared. Lady Alicia gave a reassuring smile, as safe as anything can be, but her fingers trembled slightly near the box, only slightly, a micro-movement, easily missed, not missed by Miss Marple. The box holding the item was old. Solid wood, metal corners, a small lock in front. Miss Marple studied it carefully. Her eyes moved in slow notes, noticing the grain, the faint scratch near the hinge, the slight misalignment at the edge. Someone had opened it often, more often than the hostess admitted. More recently than tradition suggested, Miss Marple watched Lady Alicia's hand hover near the lock, not touching, not retreating, just hovering, as if deciding whether to secure it or leave it for display, a decision unmade. A quiet unease crept into the room, not fear, not danger, just a soft shift, a feeling that something delicate balanced on someone's intention. Miss Marple lowered her gaze. She traced the expressions of the guests, the instructor's sharpened interest, the merchant's hungry curiosity, the vet's silent concern, Lily's careful stillness. Each person looked at the item differently. Each gaze carried its own weight, its own want, its own worry. Miss Marple returned her attention to the velvet. Square. The item shone softly, calm, beautiful, old. Yet the calm did not feel steady. Not tonight. Not with so many eyes fixed upon it. One pair of eyes lingered longer than the rest, longer than polite interest allowed, long enough to disturb the quiet. The item shone, and someone watched it too closely. The weather shifted softly, not loud, not sudden, just a small change in the air around the hall. A quiet reminder that evening moved closer. Inside, the room held its calm, but calm could thin when watched closely. Calm could stretch. Calm could strain. The lights flickered once. A single pulse, a mild dimming, barely enough to draw comment, yet enough to pull every eye upward for a moment. Mr. Harlan cleared his throat, a small, nervous sound. He tried to hide it behind a smile. The smile did not settle well. It tugged too tightly at his cheek. Clara shifted her weight, her hands folded too fast. She looked at the item on the velvet, then away, then back again. Her breath caught briefly. A sound almost too soft to hear. A remark rose from the merchant. Something about the object's value, something about auctions, something about insurance. His voice smooth, but the words landed sharply, too sharply for a friendly gathering. Lady Alicia stiffened, just a little. Her reply carried warmth, but the warmth thinned at the edges. She did not want talk of money. Not tonight, not with guests watching her so closely. Dr. Shaw stepped back from the table, a subtle retreat. Not far, just one step. He rubbed his thumb along his glove seam, a sign of worry, a sign of thought. He kept his gaze low, as if avoiding a question no one had asked yet. Madame Reeve stood very still, her hands clasped neatly, but her eyes traced every person, every motion, every breath that faltered. She held her posture like someone expecting something to shift, someone ready for it, someone waiting. Lily entered with a fresh pot of tea. She poured without sound. Her hand trembled once, only once. The drop nearly spilled, but did not. She tightened her hold, set the pot down gently. Her eyes flicked toward the item, then away quickly. Miss Marple watched all of it. She did not move much. She did not draw attention. She simply stood in the warm hush and let each detail settle in her thoughts. These were small things. Little tensions, little cracks, moments that whispered, not shouted. She felt the change begin. Not danger, not alarm, just a tilt, a lean in the atmosphere, like something shifting slightly out of place, a pattern slipping, a thread pulling loose. The guests kept speaking, polite words, light conversation, but each voice carried a thin edge now. Each gesture carried meaning beyond its surface. Miss Marple folded her hands. The shift had begun. Soft, quiet, almost gentle, yet unmistakable. She looked toward the lamp above the table. The bulb glowed steadily. For a moment, just a moment, and then another flicker. The lights went out. No warning, no sound before it. Just darkness. Complete and sudden. A small gasp rose from someone near the table. Not loud, just a quick breath pulled too sharply. Another guest shifted. A chair scraped the floor. The noise cut through the dark in a thin line. Soft panic moved through the room. Not chaos, not fear. Just the quiet unease of people who lost their bearings. Hands reached for steadiness. Feet shuffled for balance. Someone whispered a name. The name drifted into the dark. No answer came back. Miss Marple did not move. She stayed exactly where she stood. Her posture calm, her breath steady. She had known such moments before. Darkness changed people. It loosened caution. It revealed intent. She listened. Every small sound mattered now. A skirt brushed against furniture. A sleeve caught the edge of a chair. A cup rattled slightly on its saucer. Someone exhaled too fast. Someone held their breath too long. Then footsteps. Not toward the doorway, not toward the center, but in the wrong direction entirely. A path that made no sense for anyone seeking safety. A path chosen with purpose. A path chosen by someone who knew the hall better than they pretended. The whisper returned, lower this time, almost a hiss of worry, or warning. Miss Marple could not tell which. She closed her eyes. Darkness often told more than light. She counted the breaths in the room. One near her left shoulder, one farther back near the wall, another trembling near the velvet table, a fourth shifting nervously near the tea tray. Then a breath that did not match the others. Too calm, too measured, too controlled. A breath belonging to someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Someone who waited for the dark. Someone who wanted it. A hand brushed lightly against a surface. A soft scrape. A quiet thud of something moved. Not dropped. Moved. With intent. Miss Marple kept counting. Slow. Steady. She knew the pattern of a panicked room. This pattern was different. This pattern held direction. This pattern held motive. Someone took another step. A careful one. A step that avoided a known creak in the floor. A step far too precise for chance. Miss Marple listened closer. Her breath barely moved. Her thoughts sharpened in the quiet. The darkness pressed around them all. Yet one sound rose through it. Soft, low, intentional. And she heard a movement that did not belong to the room. The candles returned slowly. Small flames. Soft light. Enough to see faces again. Enough to see the room settle back into shape. Guests blinked at the sudden brightness. Some relieved. Some still tense. Some trying to look calm while their hands shook. Miss Marple looked around the table. She counted each face, one by one. Quietly. Carefully. One person was missing. The absence pressed into the room, unspoken at first. Then Clara whispered the name. A thin, trembling sound. No answer came. No reply from the darkened corridor. No voice returning the call. The search began without discussion. People moved in small groups. Some calling softly. Some checking nearby rooms. Some avoiding the corners. Miss Marple walked with steady steps. Not rushed, not slow, just steady. She knew darkness left traces. She knew footsteps carried meaning. She followed the faint pattern of disturbed air. A gentle instinct. A practiced sense. The hallway tightened into a narrower passage. A storage area waited at the end. Usually quiet, seldom used. Tonight it felt heavy. Lily stopped at the doorway. Her hand flew to her mouth. A small gasp escaped. Barely a sound, but enough. The missing guest lay near the storage room, still, positioned at an angle that spoke of a fall, a sudden one. Not natural, not expected. A small object rested beside the body, not meant for harm, yet used for it. Old, common, yet chosen with purpose. Lady Alicia stepped back quickly, her breath thin. Her hands rose halfway, then lowered again. She did not speak. Miss Marple knelt slightly. Her eyes followed the fabric. The creases, the weight of the body against the floor. Details told their own story. They always did. She found a tiny strand on the edge of the victim's sleeve. A clothing fiber. Fine. Light. Caught against the wood where the arm brushed. A small thread with a soft curl. She lifted it gently, held it close to the candle, examined the twist, the thread type, the weave. Something else caught her attention. A faint scorch mark, near the shoulder seam. Something lightly burned. Not enough to damage deeply, just enough to signal struggle, or contact with something warm, something nearby. Miss Marple turned the fiber between her fingers. Her thoughts aligned one by one. She remembered movements earlier, small gestures, the closeness of certain garments, the shift of certain hands, the fabric she had glimpsed in the lamplight, the pattern she had quietly stored in her mind. She did not speak yet. She only observed. Careful, attentive, silent. The guests waited behind her, breath shallow, eyes wide, all watching for answers, all hoping the answers did not point toward them. Miss Marple held the fiber once more against the light. Its color, its shape, its subtle curl, all familiar. The fiber matched something she had seen minutes earlier. The storm pressed against the hall. Not loud, not wild, just steady. A curtain of snow sealing everything beyond the windows. Clara peeked through a narrow gap. Her breath fogged the glass. She stepped back quickly. "The road is gone," she whispered. No one questioned her. They all knew it already. Lady Alicia tried the telephone next. She lifted the receiver with hope, held it to her ear, waited. Only silence answered her. A long, empty silence. She placed the receiver down, neatly, precisely. Her hands trembled, but only for a second. She smoothed her skirt to hide it. Mr. Harlan paced once, a short line across the carpet. He stopped near the table, looked at the item still resting on velvet, looked away again, too quickly. Madame Reeve folded her hands, tight, firm. She stood near the fireplace, though no fire burned there. Her gaze stayed on the group, quiet, measuring. Dr. Shaw leaned against a wall, gloves in hand. He tapped one finger against the leather, slow, uneasy. His eyes kept drifting toward the corridor where the body lay. Lily moved silently between them all, gathering cups, straightening a cloth, checking the lamp. Her steps careful, small, almost hesitant. No one spoke for a moment. The hall felt smaller, tighter, as if the snow had pushed in against the walls, as if the storm wanted no one leaving. Not tonight. Miss Marple stood near the table, her hands folded gently, her face calm, but her thoughts moved, quiet lines forming, patterns settling. The storm had sealed the hall completely. The road was gone. No tracks, no path, only white and wind. The telephone remained silent. No signal, no connection, only the faint hum of a dead line. The inspector could not come. Not now, not soon, not until the storm eased. And storms like this did not ease quickly. Lady Alicia tried to reassure the group. She spoke softly, promised warmth, promised safety, promised tea. But her voice held tension under the promise. Everyone understood the situation. Even without saying it aloud, they were trapped, all of them, inside Turnham Hall, the hall that held a rare item, a frightened group, a dead body, and too many unspoken thoughts. Miss Marple lowered her eyes. She had seen this shape before. Not here, not with these people, but in other rooms, other storms, other nights when truth had nowhere to hide. The implications stood clear as candlelight. Simple, quiet, undeniable. Everyone must stay inside, all night, until morning, until help arrived, until answers were found. Miss Marple breathed softly. A single thought settled. Steady, certain. The killer was now trapped with them. Morning came slowly. Soft light, soft movement. No rush in the hall. Tea was poured quietly. Lily carried the tray with steady hands. Cups clinked gently. No one spoke at first. Sleep had been thin. Thoughts had been heavy. Footsteps sounded at the door. Measured. Firm. Expected. Inspector Harrow had finally arrived. Snow still clung to his coat. He removed his hat with a short nod. "Morning," he said calmly. Not warm, not cold, just a man ready for work. His eyes swept the room. He counted faces. He counted silences. He counted unease. He set his notebook down, asked for the sequence of events, asked for who stood where, asked for who moved first, asked for what each person saw. Questions began. Slow. Steady. One yesterday. Time. No voice escaped his attention. No gesture passed unseen. Miss Marple sat near the corner, hands folded neatly, back straight, eyes soft. She listened, nodded, observed. Each answer rested in her thoughts. Each detail found a place. The hostess spoke first. Her explanation smooth, practiced. She described the craft circle, the lights, the brief panic. Her voice held steady, but her hands twisted a ring. Only once, only briefly. Clara followed. Her words trembled. She tried to stay calm, but her timeline wobbled. A few minutes shifted backward, then forward again. She said she remembered every step, yet she paused often, too often. Mr. Harlan answered next, his tone confident, his posture relaxed. But he talked too long, explained too much. Details that no one asked for, details that did not help, details that circled around the question rather than touching it. Madame Reeve spoke softly, clear sentences, careful thoughts. Yet her eyes drifted toward the velvet table, as if checking the item, as if protecting it. Her calm held a crease, a small one. Dr. Shaw kept his answers simple, direct, short. But he hesitated when asked about his movements during the blackout. A pause, a breath held, then a rushed explanation. A nervous sentence that did not sit comfortably in the air. Lily responded last, her voice quiet, her words respectful. She described where she stood, where she walked, who she saw. Her answers were straight, almost too straight. Her gaze stayed fixed on the floor. The inspector wrote quickly. Short lines, short notes. He looked up often, measured each expression, measured each shift in tone. Miss Marple watched even more quietly. Her eyes moved gently from one speaker to the next. She noted each pause, each uncertain breath, each small correction. Contradictions began to form, thin ones, soft ones, the kind only careful listening revealed. A time that did not align, a step, described differently by two people, a sound one person heard, a sound another insisted never happened. Miss Marple tilted her head. A thought formed in a quiet corner of her mind. A thread tugged at a pattern. Then an answer came, a simple one, delivered calmly. But the shape of it was wrong, very wrong. Not loudly wrong, not boldly wrong, just wrong, in a gentle, unmistakable way. One answer did not fit its question. A quiet hour passed after the inspector's questions. Guests stayed close to the main hall. No one wished to wander far, not after the night they had lived through. Miss Marple moved with slow steps, calm steps. Her eyes traced corners, edges, little spaces between objects, places where truth often hid. Near the side corridor, something caught her attention. A small scrap on the floor, barely the size of a fingernail, soft, curled, easily missed. She bent gently and lifted it. A tiny piece of cloth, torn, not from heavy fabric. Something lighter, something worn close to the body. Miss Marple turned it in her fingers, silky on one side, rough on the other. A deliberate tear, not accidental. It had been pulled, not cut. She tucked it safely into her handkerchief, then looked toward the wall. Near the storage door, a faint mark darkened the frame, barely visible unless examined closely. A burn mark, small, thin. A charred line, as if fabric brushed something warm, not scorched deeply, just kissed by heat, enough to leave a sign. Miss Marple touched it lightly. The wood felt cool now. But something warm had been here earlier. Maybe a candle, maybe a lamp, maybe a hand holding something too close. She stepped back, her eyes lowered to the floor again. Another clue waited near the metal hinge. A strand of wool, caught perfectly on the corner, twisted, fine, a very specific shade. Miss Marple lifted it carefully, held it to the light from the window. It glowed softly, a familiar tone, a color she had seen more than once in the room, on someone's clothing. She walked back to the hall, slow steps, measured steps, each thought finding its place. The guests sat together, silent teacups, downcast eyes, small attempts at conversation that did not travel far. Miss Marple observed their garments, patterns, fibers, stitching, thread types, colors that matched, or nearly matched. One shade stood out. One shade echoed the wool in her hand. One person wore that shade with confidence. She moved closer, not suspiciously, just gently, like an elderly woman seeking better light. Her eyes compared the thread to the sleeve, a domestic habit, natural, unnoticed by most. The weave aligned neatly, too neatly. Miss Marple thought of household tasks, of mending torn cardigans, of pulling loose yarn through needles, of small fibers clinging where they should not, of how clothing kept secrets without trying. A domestic analogy settled into place. When a thread catches, once, it frays. When it catches twice, it tells a story. When it catches in the dark after a struggle, it points. She looked again at the wool, then at the garment, then at the person wearing it. The match was quiet, clear, precise. The thread matched, too perfectly. Midnight settled over Turnham Hall. The guests slept in scattered rooms, some lightly, some restlessly. The storm still whispered outside, but softer now. Miss Marple lay awake, not from fear, not from worry, simply from habit. Her mind worked best in quiet hours. Thoughts arranged themselves. Patterns opened gently. Then she heard it. Footsteps in the hall. Light steps. Careful ones. A rhythm meant to be unnoticed. But she noticed. She sat up slowly, let her eyes adjust. Listened again. The steps moved toward the far corridor, not toward the main room, not toward help, toward the private side of the hall. A faint light flickered against the wall. A small one, a handheld one. Someone carried a candle. The flame wavered with each step. Miss Marple rose quietly. Her slippers made no sound. Her hands stayed close to her sides. She moved with the soft certainty of someone who had followed midnight footsteps before. The hall felt long, still, but not empty. The small, moving light confirmed it. Someone was searching, not wandering. Searching. She stayed several paces behind, close enough to observe, far enough to avoid being noticed. The figure ahead leaned into shadows, turned corners with confidence, knew the path, knew the creaks on the floor. Miss Marple watched the pause in their step, watched them lift the candle, watched them bend toward a shelf near the old storage door. Their hand moved quickly, too quickly for calm curiosity. They searched under folded cloths, shifted items, lifted a lid, closed it sharply. A small sound escaped them, frustration. Quiet, but real. Then the candle slipped. A sudden tilt, a near fall. The flame brushed too close to a fabric edge. A tiny flare, a tiny scorch, then steadied again. But the moment was enough. A single glimmer lit the floor, and Miss Marple saw it. Another wool strand, twisted, dropped near the baseboard, caught by the faint heat, curled just slightly from the warmth. The color matched the one she found earlier. The curl matched. The fiber length matched. Everything aligned in a quiet, undeniable way. The figure straightened again. They looked around quickly, as if checking for witnesses. as if unsure whether the candle had exposed too much. Their breath came faster, barely noticeable, but noticeable enough. Miss Marple stayed still, completely still, her eyes steady, her mind calm. She watched the hand clutching the candle, the same hand that had brushed past something last night, the same sleeve that carried the matching thread, the same quiet movements that hid intention. A truth settled gently into place, not loudly, not suddenly, just naturally, the way truth often settled when patience guided it. She looked at the wool again, then at the figure's back, then at the careful, searching hand. And this time, she knew whose hands it came from. Miss Marple sat quietly in the small morning room. No bustle, no voices, just the slow settling of the house after a restless night. She folded her hands in her lap. Calm hands, still hands, her eyes lowered to the table before her. Not to study it, but to let her thoughts settle in their usual, gentle order. She reviewed each clue, one at a time, not rushing, not pressing, letting each detail return to her in its own quiet way. The first clue, the fiber at the seam, light, soft, a color carried by only one person in the hall. The second clue, the burn mark near the door, small, thin, matching the moment when someone carried a candle too close to fabric. The third clue, the midnight search, careful steps, a steady hand, a familiarity with the hall's hidden corners. The fourth clue, the scrap of cloth, torn, placed where it should not be, a piece pulled during struggle, not dropped by chance. The fifth clue, the timeline, a pause where there should have been movement, movement where there should have been stillness. One account slightly too neat, another slightly too rehearsed. Miss Marple breathed softly. Her thoughts touched each clue gently, like fingers brushing spools of wool. Each clue a strand, each strand leading toward a pattern. She noticed the contradiction, a small one, delicate, easy to miss, but it sat at the center of everything. Two statements that could not coexist, two actions that could not align, one person who claimed to be in two states of calm at once. She stored that contradiction beside another, the way a knitter stores a stitch, quietly, with purpose. Another detail surfaced, and another, each clue resting against the next, not loud, not dramatic, just fitting, just, settling into place. Knitting logic formed the truth, stitch by stitch, line by line. The way Miss Marple always saw patterns, not in grand gestures, but in the domestic rhythm of small things. Threads, edges, habits, moments. A garment made wrong cannot hide its mistake. A row knitted backward reveals itself in the fabric. A pulled thread points to tension where someone tugged too sharply. Human behavior followed the same principle. People left their errors in the spaces between their words. Miss Marple lifted her head, looked toward the hall. The guests sat there, waiting, thinking the truth still tangled, thinking the night's confusion still held the upper hand. She whispered softly, barely a breath, barely a sound. "I believe I understand." The air felt lighter for a moment, as if the house itself had exhaled, as if the long night had loosened its hold. But Miss Marple knew the pattern's final shape, and she knew it held a surprise. A quiet one, a gentle one, but a surprise all the same. She folded her hands again, ready to speak when the moment came, ready to reveal the truth with calm clarity. And the pattern was not what anyone assumed. All guests gathered in the main hall, chairs pulled close, hands folded, eyes lowered. Miss Marple stood near the table, her voice calm, her posture steady. She held no accusation in her tone, only clarity. She showed each clue. First, the fiber, then the scrap of cloth, then the scorch mark near the door. Small things, quiet things, but each one held weight. She explained each movement from the blackout. Who stepped where? Who hesitated? Who moved with intention rather than fear? She reconstructed the timeline gently, a careful walk through minutes, a reminder of where truth settled and where lies slipped through. She linked the motive next. Not greed alone, Not panic alone, but a mix of pressure, pride, and opportunity. A reason rooted in quiet desperation. Then she named the culprit. Softly. Without drama. Without cruelty. Just the plain truth given shape. No one spoke. No one moved. And the room fell still. The guests recovered slowly. Soft voices returned. Small movements resumed. The weight of the night lifted in careful degrees. Outside, the storm eased. The village steadied again. Paths formed. Calm returned to familiar corners. Tea was poured for everyone. Warm cups, quiet sips. No rush, no strain. Miss Marple spoke one gentle line. Truth settles, when people finally stop pushing it away. A symbolic object remained on the table. The velvet cloth. Untouched now. Its importance faded back into stillness. Warm silence filled the hall. Not fearful, not tense, just steady, just relieved. Miss Marple folded her hands. Her eyes softened. But the night still held one soft echo. Davis returned with a warm, gentle tone. Thank you, dear listeners, for sharing another quiet mystery with us tonight. He paused softly, letting the calm settle. Tell me, what moment caught your attention, and where are you listening from? His gratitude carried a steady warmth. Your quiet hearts make these evenings special, he added. A small breath, a soft smile in his voice. Rest well now, and remember, tomorrow, another kettle will boil. One light glowed gently in a distant window. A small object rested quietly on the table inside, untouched now. The narrow lane outside faded softly into the night. A clock ticked in an easy, steady rhythm. Warmth settled back into the quiet corners of the house. Nothing stirred, nothing pressed. Only calm remained, and the village rested once more,